Hello, here is a Yamaha 9.9 two-stroke outboard motor. This is a tiller long shaft. This motor is going to be getting a full service, which includes lower unit fluid, impeller for the water pump, spark plugs, and a detail on the motor. So one of the first things we're going to do on this motor is replace the spark plugs. Here I'm going to get my wrench, remove the top spark plug. Then I'm going to install my brand new spark plug, which is right here. And usually in front of your motor up here in the bowl, it usually, there's a sticker down there that indicates which plug you need. And for this particular motor, it requires a B7HS-10. And when you get your new plug, you want to look in your manual accordingly in order to properly gap the spark plug. These plugs are already gapped. I checked them. Then we're just going to put the new ones in, tighten them down. Don't want to over tighten them. And that's it. You do the same thing for the bottom one. So our next step is we're going to remove the fuel filter. This is where your gas comes in, filters out the debris, and it goes into your carburetor. And I'm going to remove this to check the filter for any dirt, and if there's dirt, I'm going to clean it. Alright. Sometimes you could unscrew this by hand if it's not too tight. And this one's on pretty good. So if you run into a situation where you can't remove this filter by hand, you want to get a pair of channel locks, get a rag so we don't screw up the housing, and you want to twist it in the correct direction. So we just broke that loose. Keep the filter upside up, just like this, because you will have fuel in here. You don't want any of that spilling anywhere. Alright, so the filter is down here. So if you're looking closely, you can see all the stuff that's in there. The debris that was filtered. And all you want to do is you want to empty out this gas that's in here and get some carb cleaner or brake cleaner. And you want to spray out all that gunk that's settled on the bottom, clean it out with the rag, and then reinstall the filter back on the motor. So now we're going to reinstall everything. As you can see, everything is clean. What we're going to do is reinstall this. Make sure this is tight also, because if it's not, when you squeeze your primer bulb on your fuel hose, it's going to squirt everywhere. So just tighten it by hand, which is fine. Put it back into position. Get your nut that came off of the stud on top of the fuel filter housing. Tighten that down. There we go. So now I'm removing the lower unit in order to get to the water pump. And I already disconnected the shift shaft right there. It's really easy. It's only, you need two 10mm wrenches in order to disconnect that. And you have to put the motor in reverse, I believe. And now all I'm doing is disconnecting these four 12mm bolts. They're actually two on one side, as you can see in the camera right now, but also on the opposite side on the lower unit there's also two 12mm bolts that need to be removed in order to disconnect the whole lower unit from the engine. So here you can see that the lower unit is off, and now we're going to move on to remove the water pump housing in order to put a brand new impeller in this lower unit. In order to remove the housing, you're going to need a 10mm wrench or socket. Either one will work. So once you remove 2 of the bolts on the housing, flip your lower unit, and you will also see 2 10mm bolts that need to be removed on the water pump housing. So after removing all the 4 bolts that are located on the water pump housing, all you have to do is jiggle and lift up the water pump housing up, and she'll come right off. And usually the impeller will be easy to remove. As you can see in the video, I could slide it right up, but sometimes it gets stuck right here, so you need a flathead screwdriver and help it to pry it up, because sometimes it gets a little rusty right here and it locks the impeller on the drive shaft. And if you look closely, there is a key that it's supposed to line up on the notch on the water pump housing, so make sure you don't lose this key. Sometimes it will fall out, sometimes it won't. Just keep your eyes on it, because you are going to need that. And if you don't have that in your impeller, you won't be pumping water into your motor, and you're going to wonder why is the motor pumping water when there's a brand new impeller. So here is the old impeller. As you can see, the fins are all bent up and they're supposed to be straight. Look at this one. So this motor was definitely due for a new impeller. So here I just want to compare both impellers, the new versus the old. Huge difference. This is going to increase the water flow in the engine, so it helps cools the motor down. And it's just a maintenance thing that must be done. We're going to slide it right on the shaft. We're going to line it up with the key. And it should go all the way down just like that. So the next step is we want to slide this impeller housing onto the drive shaft. And you want to line it up correctly. And you want to rotate the drive shaft. Rotate the drive shaft clockwise while you're putting pressure on the water pump housing. And she will go all the way down. There you go. Now we're going to reinstall the bolts. Make sure you put some type of grease on these bolts so they don't seize in the lower unit. And next time you remove these bolts to service the lower unit, they'll come right out. So the type of grease I'm using is Yamaha lubricant marine grease. You don't have to buy this because it says Yamaha. I just had this laying around from a previous project, and that's what I'm going to be lubricating the bolts with. So here is the top of the drive shaft. It's always important to clean the old grease with the rag and to put new grease on the splines, because sometimes if you don't re-grease this, put new grease, the drive shaft could get stuck in the power head, and you don't want that to happen. So I had the lower unit installed into the motor. There's only one bolt holding the lower unit. So I also have to put the 3 bolts on the lower unit, and I also have to connect the shift shaft. So the next step that we are going to do is we are going to drain the lower unit fluid, and you are going to need a flathead screwdriver. Here is the bottom screw, and you also want to release the top screw. And as you can see, the gear oil is not milky or white, which indicates that there is no water getting into the lower unit, so the seals are good. So now we are going to install new gear fluid. I have one of these pumpers, which makes it a lot easier. And we're going to keep on pumping this until it starts pouring out of the top. There we go. That means it's full. You want to get your drain bolt back in. Tighten this down. wipe the excess oil. And also you want to do the same with this one, but you want to be a little bit quicker because you will have some fluid coming out. As you just saw, I put my finger on the bottom. Now I'm gonna use my fingers to slightly tighten the drain bolt. Now I'm going to tighten it all the way. All right, so I have the engine in a bucket in order to start it up to make sure that the impeller is working properly. Here we go. As you can see, there's a good stream coming out, which tells me that the impeller is working really good. I'm going to shut the motor off and turn it back on. Starts first pull. Great motor. So now what I'm doing is I'm giving this motor a quick detail before this motor gets shipped out to the customer. All right, she's all done. I gave her a little cleanup. Looks really clean. This motor is all original. The paint is original. This motor has never been opened. The engine, everything is original on this motor. Look at that paint shine. It's a beauty. And I'm gonna pop the hood off of this so you guys can see the inside. There she is. Very clean motor. All right, appreciate you guys watching and hope you guys stay tuned for more videos on this channel.